I want to remove blame entirely from the conversation. It's not about blaming others. It's not about blaming ourselves. It's about, as you said, we are the common denominator in all our relationships. That doesn't mean that we are the problem necessarily or the only problem, but it does mean that if we don't have what we want in our love lives, we can blame our mom, we can blame our dad, we can blame the weather, we can blame our exes. But at the end of the day, we have to be willing to look within, because if we do look within and take a really hard look at our patterns and look, a lot of our patterns are not our fault. We do not learn these skills in school. So we have to actually learn them now. And that's how you get what you want in life. And that's how you get what you want in your love life.
Jillian Turecki, welcome back to Passion Love Pursuit podcast. Long awaited interview to have with you, and at the best time yet, which is when you're launching your book. And I cannot wait for people to get their hands on this. So thank you again for being back on the show.
Oh, thank you, Erica. It's so fun to be back. Very happy.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about your book. So it begins with you, the 9 hard truths about love that will change your life. And so first I want to address exactly that important statement. Sorry, it's been a long morning.
You're kidding. It's like the story of my life.
It begins with you. So I know so many people point their fingers at other people being the problem. Like, he said this, she said that, he's avoidant, she's crazy, whatever the list goes on. So I would like to just believe that, at least this is my belief, that the only way we could radically change our life is by taking ownership of our part we play in our own misery. So what are your thoughts on this? Of course, going to this statement, it begins with you.
Yeah, responsibility over our lives is the only way that we make change. Yeah, when I was conceiving of this book and what it's really all about is, even if it was, and I put this in big quotation marks, their fault, and like truly not yours, like even if they truly sabotage the relationship, you still have to take ownership of the fact that that's the person you chose. And that maybe inside of the relationship, there were tons of red flags that you ignored. So it's just, I want to remove blame entirely from the conversation. It's not about blaming others. It's not about blaming ourselves. It's about, as you said, we are the common denominator in all our relationships. That doesn't mean that we are the problem necessarily or the only problem, but it does mean that if we don't have what we want in our love lives, we can blame our mom, we can blame our dad, we can blame the weather, we can blame our exes. But at the end of the day, we have to be willing to look within, because if we do look within and take a really hard look at our patterns and look, a lot of our patterns are not our fault. We do not learn these skills in school. So we have to actually learn them now. And that's how you get what you want in life. And that's how you get what you want in your love life, which is, relationships are hard. And it's where people struggle the most. It's like love and money.
And that really rings true for my story. My biggest pain and struggles were in relationships. And you, Crystal, you said one important point, that we're the common denominator in our relationships. Right. And I want to pull out one thing that you said in regards to this in your book. Every relationship we have has one thing in common: us. I know this can be a tough pill to swallow, but it's a necessary one. Without understanding this truth, we will continue to feel powerless, frustrated, victimized in our relationships. This isn't about blame or shame. It's about empowerment. I personally believe that nothing will change until you turn the mirror on ourselves. So crystallizing that point, I think this is so important, because I think that's the only way our relationships in the future will change, is when we turn that mirror on ourselves. Yes. So what would you say to that further, to expand on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Whether it's, I have to learn how to communicate differently, whether it's my understanding of what it is to love needs to be informed more. Whether it's I've been accepting and tolerating way less than what I deserve, whether it's I keep fighting with my husband or my wife or my partner, and I don't know why and I don't know how to make it better. It's always that. And the thing is, we can't change another person. We can only change ourselves, and it's hard. We don't. Our egos don't want to accept that something in us, whether it's our thinking, whether it's our belief system, whether it's our behavior, whether it's a lack of skill that we need to actually educate ourselves on. We don't like to think that it's something that we are lacking or something that we are doing. But it is actually quite empowering because there's so little in this life that we have control over.
Right.
But we do actually, and so many people come to me feeling absolutely paralyzed, powerless, diminished, helpless, hopeless when it comes to their relationship life, particularly their romantic relationships. And it's scary because we need love. And I wrote this book as sort of the answer to that, which is, um, you have a lot of stories about maybe what's being done to you. Um, you might even be blaming yourself unfairly. So here's a guide to how to not only look in the mirror, but how to look in the mirror. Like, what do you actually have to look for? And then how do you change? Because that's really that's where the essence is. Like, you can have all the insight and awareness into your trauma and your past, which, by the way, is a great start. A lot of people don't have the insights. You need it.
Yeah.
But then to change is a whole different story. And that's the hardest thing for any coach or therapist who works with people is, how do I get this person to change, to grow, to evolve, to make different choices. So yeah.
So true. And I know that, like you mentioned, it is quite empowering, like you said, because now you're in control of changing the trajectory of your life. And it's
Yes.
not because of other things. It's actually now you have the power. And I think that is empowering. So I think like that's why I love your book and the wealth of information you put in the book and the tactics and the tools and the guidance and also real life stories, which I really liked that you included in the book is like, yes, it's hard. Like, let's be honest, changing, transformation, it's hard, it's ugly, whatever you want to call it. But obviously on the flip side, how liberating it is. And so I think we have to look at it that way. And I know it was hard for me to take responsibility for that I was playing a part in everything. But
It's not
again,
easy.
on the flip, what's that?
It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. But on the flip side, it's like, oh, actually, it's quite awesome. It's quite awesome that I was able to take responsibility and then change my patterning and at least have the awareness of really I was getting in my own way. So
Yes.
I think a
And
lot
no
of
one
us
will
do
get,
that.
oh, sorry to interrupt. But I was going to say, no one's going to get in our own way more than ourselves.
So well said. It's so true. So you work with thousands of people, and I'm sure a lot of couples come to you, but would you say it's actually not the couple you need to work with, but the individual?
Um, well, when I do work with couples, it's both. You have to work with the couple and you have to work with the individual. So it's definitely a combination of both. But I've worked with many people who, their partner didn't want to partake, or, their partner couldn't partake. And sometimes it just takes one person to make shifts in their behavior and in their thinking and in their communication to create a sort of amazing ripple effect in the relationship. Like, truly and sincerely, sometimes it just takes one person making a shift. Because then the other person starts to respond to that person totally differently. And so that's another thing that I found, another discovery that I made when I started this work that was really, uh, really fascinating to me, which is that actually we have so much more influence over our relationship than we think we do, and that by making a change rather than, well, I'm not going to change unless they change first. We so many of us play that game, and that's why people get stuck when they're in relationships.
Yeah, actually, it's just like the trigger
Mhm.
response, right?
Yeah,
So would you say most of the problems we have in relationship was learned at an early age from our parents or from certain
yeah,
traumas, and then we develop these triggers and we bring that into relationships?
yeah. I mean, we have a conglomerate of influences that have been conditioning us for ages, right? It's our family for sure. So part of that could be you saw how mom and dad interacted, and you learned a lot because of that. Um, your attachment stuff. So if you had an absent parent in some way, then maybe there's some anxiety, or maybe there's a lot of enmeshment, so there's avoidance. So there's that from childhood. There's also just the way the family expressed love, the way the family communicated. Did you sit down and have dinner together? Um, but it's not so much, you know, cause and effect is not so binary and not so clean. Sometimes, you saw mom get beat up by dad, and then you said, that's never going to be me. And so you did the exact opposite. But we're also influenced by peers,
Yeah.
we're influenced by television, by literature, by art. So we have, it's so, another thing that was just really wild for me to discover is that so much of our thinking is conditioned thinking.
Right.
So much of it is what we find attractive is conditioned. It's societal, it's cultural. What we find uh, joyful or not joyful, so much of it is conditioning. So a big piece of the puzzle of trying to understand yourself and then to eventually make change is, what's your conditioning? If it's conditioning, it's not innate.
Mm.
And if it's conditioning, you can recondition yourself.
So amazing. And that's again going into the tools of your book, is that's when you're listing off these conditionings that we've learned and then how to repattern those.
Yes.
Beautiful. A lot of people will think it's called the what syndrome of when, like when I get married, when I get in this relationship, I'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not happy to begin with, that will ultimately always resurface, whether it be at the beginning or years down the line. So, what would you say to people that they should focus on instead of this when I have this when syndrome?
Well, one of the biggest plagues to our thinking is happiness is outside of me. So when I get that job, I'll be happy. When I get that relationship, I'll be happy. When I get that money, I'll be happy. And the thing is, when you first get that thing, you will experience elevated emotion. Like you'll experience what we would refer to as happiness. But we take ourselves wherever we go. And so it's only a moment of time before we're like, oh, we're like on to the next thing. We take things for granted all the time. And a lot of people, happiness and fulfillment is an inside job. And it doesn't actually, here's the thing that's so interesting to me and paradoxical to me. We don't really get happier or more fulfilled by acquiring more things. We actually get happier and more fulfilled when we are giving, when we are connecting, when we are when our minds are open to um, glimmers and magic in the world, music, art, nature, that's actually what makes a human being quote unquote happy. It's not acquiring all the stuff, because there's lots of people who have the relationship, they have the money, they have all the comfort that they need. They never have to worry about being insecure in the world, and they're still unhappy.
Of course.
Why is that? Well, because maybe I don't think that we were actually put on this earth to just be comfortable. Like, we want a little bit of friction. We want a little adventure. We want a little, just enough struggle so that we can get through the struggle, and then on the other side what we feel is a sense of accomplishment. So this idea, when I get the relationship I'll be happy, is a lie, because what happens is that then what you're doing is putting so much pressure on yourself and on the relationship and on another person for this person to come into your life and make you happy. And then you will wake up one day and you will realize that they are just as fucked up as you are. Like, they're just as messed up as you are. Your problems are resurfacing. And then you will feel crushed by the weight of your failed expectations in the other
Mhm.
person and in love and in relationship. And so one of the truths that I write in the book is no one is coming to save you. And what I mean by that is no one is coming to just make you happy. And that said, there's no point in being in a relationship if both people are not in some way making each other's lives a little easier and a
Of
little
course.
better, or a lot better. But, you know, you still have to be able to access that on your own.
Absolutely. So good. And so important to know that truth that no one is going to save you. Like, you have to do the work on yourself. You have to actually fill up your own cup so that you could give your whole self to that relationship. And instead of sabotaging, I think the one thing that could happen is the self sabotage to that relationship by wanting it to be and forcing it to kind of be what you want it to be. Right. So,
Yes. and
so
and having these really unrealistic expectations, which we get from the movies, which we may have gotten from childhood, you know. But a relationship is work, and it takes work, but it should be more times than not pleasant and peaceful. And if it's
absolutely.
not, then it just becomes a source of suffering in your life. Like, it should be a source of love in your life. It should be a source of all of it. It just can't be the only source.
Yeah, so well said and so important to say and for people to actually hear that and reflect on, like, where do they sit in that, what you just mentioned,
Yes.
right? Because I think a lot of people ignore the truth and they don't want to confront the truth because it's hard, right? And
Yeah.
so they kind of like push it back there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's like, I don't want to look at it, so I'll just push it aside, but it just never kind of goes away, does it?
No,
Yeah.
exactly. It keeps on nagging at you for
Yeah.
sure. So, how does somebody build more awareness around their triggers or the patterns that they are playing over and over and instead being reactive to them? Like, what would you say to develop more conscious approach to handling our triggers in a healthy way?
Yeah, I think it's about noticing when you are triggered, and saying, what is this really about? What am I feeling right now? Why oh, I'm feeling angry. Okay, what's really going on with that? Oh, I'm feeling like sad right now. Okay. Like, what's actually happening? Look, this idea of triggered is such an overused word. I feel like in the zeitgeist right now, sometimes you're going to get annoyed at your partner
Mhm.
because they're annoying. And sometimes they're going to get annoyed at you because you're being annoying. How are you going to respond to that? Are you going to make it into a really big deal? Are you going to get extremely argumentative? Are you going to pull away? Are you going to get loud? Or can you just see it as like, we live together and sometimes we're going to annoy each other? Or, you know what? They woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's okay. I'm going to give them a pass. Or, is this something that I really need to address? Because if I don't, then I'm going to be bringing it up 5 years from now, and that's not good for us. I'm just going to get resentful. So it's really asking ourselves that, like, what do you do when, what is your go-to when you are triggered or annoyed by your partner? What is the thing that you do to punish them?
What do you find is the common problems in relationship as far as those patterns that people do? Because we know there's the attachment styles, which I
Yes.
think actually explains a lot.
Yeah.
For people to learn about that, I think is very useful.
So let's boil it all down to fear. So regardless of attachment style, when you become afraid in a relationship, oftentimes when you're angry, oftentimes you're afraid. When you're clinging, you are afraid. And you are afraid that somehow love is going to be taken away from you, that you are going to be deprived of the very thing that you live off of, which is love. So, the most common thing in relationships that I see is, how are people reacting to their insecurity in that moment? So, some people will withhold their love. They will do the, just be a little cold, or they'll avoid, or they'll shut down a little bit, or they'll be like, you know what, I'm not going to answer the phone today. Like, let's say they don't live together. I'm gonna leave them on red just to make them a little bit, keep them on their toes. That's all insecurity.
Mm.
So what do people do the most? They withhold their love when they are afraid that they're going to lose love. And it feeds, and it's a vicious cycle. And so you've got two people who are withholding love from each other, and that's what destroys their relationship.
It's so good to know. And I think a lot of people listening to this will recognize that they do something like that. So I think, again, with more awareness, we are able to change our patterns. So I appreciate you sharing that. What do you, I know a lot of people think or seek things that are familiar. How do we break free from this so-called feeling of being safe and then more willing to choose the best option for ourselves?
Oh, wait, I want to understand your question.
Yeah.
Going for what is familiar or going for what is safe?
So people will go, or I guess this is how I would say it, is a lot of people will go for things that are familiar that they say is makes them feel safe, right? Like without knowing subconsciously, they'll go for what's familiar. Uh,
But
so
sometimes you
how
go for
does,
the familiar suffering. So you're talking about
yeah,
unconsciously
sorry.
choosing someone who's bad for you because it's familiar, or choosing the safe bet and
No,
settle.
they'll go to something that they're familiar with,
Yeah.
that they're unknowingly going with what they feel is safe.
Right. Well, it's not safe, it's familiar, right? So that's kind of different. I mean, it's so oftentimes, it's a good question. Oftentimes we choose the person, the partner, the person who we're going to be with, because it's familiar suffering. They're just like dad, or they're just like mom. And even if they look nothing like mom or dad, and even if their personality is vastly different, how they make you feel in the relationship feels familiar. So, like, dad was an alcoholic, so this guy's an alcoholic. Or mom, was like always very critical. This person is very critical. So oftentimes we choose the familiar suffering because it's what we know. It's what we know. Um, And I think that a big part of sort of unlearning certain patterns is being able to say, oh, I've chosen this because it's familiar. And I've been choosing familiar suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to do that anymore. But you first have to understand what it is that you're choosing, and why it's familiar, and also why it causes you suffering. And then you have to make the decision that you don't want to do that anymore. But in that decision, there might be work that you need to do on your self esteem and your self worth. There might be ways in which you need to get educated on how to distinguish between the tolerable versus the intolerable. It's all a process of becoming wiser and more mature. It's letting go or losing or forfeiting some of our naivete about relationships. So if you keep finding yourself in relationships that are very unhealthy or toxic in some way, how are you choosing a relationship or a person that's familiar suffering? And how are you participating in the relationship that is familiar suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you really do need to think about your parents and your family of origin. And because it's a process of bringing that which is unconscious into conscious awareness. So we're shining a light on the things that have remained hidden inside our psyche, so that we can take a look at it and be like, oh, that's why this is happening. Now I'm going to choose another way.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's commonly said by women, I keep attracting the unavailable men. Like that's like a common thing said.
Yeah, well, there's nuance to that. Should we break that down a little
Oh,
bit?
let me
Would
hear.
your audience be into that?
Yeah, I would love to hear.
Okay. So there's nuance to that. So the woman who keeps on attracting the emotionally unavailable guy, part of that could be her father was emotionally unavailable. Part of that could be that her mom was emotionally unavailable. Part of that could be she does not know her value and see her worth, which could be, I mean, the pressures of society. It could be because her mom didn't see her worth. It could be so many different things that she doesn't see her worth. But oftentimes it's also what you'll see is a naivete. So let's take a really extreme example, which actually is rare, but I think it just kind of illustrates the point. Let's just say that the guy that she keeps going for is more than just emotionally unavailable. He's toxic. And what I mean by that is that he has strong narcissistic tendencies. Maybe he is an addict who is not sober, who's in the throes of his addiction. Maybe he is, treats women just like he's only interested in sex, right? Maybe cheats a lot. Maybe he just gives crumbs of attention, and he's just not a very nice, mature guy. A lot of the There's a lot of people with very weak character, and this goes for women too,
Mm-hmm.
who appear very confident. They may be kicking ass in their careers. They could be very charming. They could be very intelligent. And so you take, the average younger woman who hasn't yet, let's say, when I say younger, like a woman who hasn't kind of wised up to this. And what she sees is women who date men are attracted to strength. So what she's seeing on the outside is a successful, good-looking guy who seems to have his life in order. He's acquired a lot of things, and he's got a lot of confidence. But she's not looking for the things that actually give him character, because that same guy could be very, very, very weak. He could be
Right.
highly insecure, which makes it so that he has to prey on women who have low self-esteem. And he's not very kind. And so he's not being in a relationship with him gives you exactly the opposite of what you want from the masculine, which is protection and emotional providership and presence. He can't give you any of that because he is so disconnected from himself. Naivete is what draws the woman to that guy because on the surface, that's what he appears to be.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom and maturity and growth is when we realize that actually what makes a man confident and and strong and masculine is his integrity. So another reason why women might go for the emotionally unavailable guy, let's just say he's just emotionally unavailable. He doesn't have to necessarily be this toxic guy.
Right.
Because women get very fixated on being chosen, on let me prove myself and get this guy.
Right. I've totally been that woman, by the way. Anyways,
Yes, I think a
just
lot
being
of women,
radically honest.
I think a lot of women have been that way because we're so conditioned to believe that like our value comes from being in a relationship, and we women tend to value relationship more than men typically do.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll like live and die for a relationship.
Right.
That's why women tend to stay too long in the wrong relationships. And so, and then for some women it really becomes like a game. It's like they're emotionally unavailable, but somehow being with him distracts me from my boring life or numbs me from a deeper pain that I don't want to look at. So if you keep quote unquote attracting emotionally unavailable men, ask yourself, are you choosing these men? What are the red flags that you're ignoring? Have you ever, do you even realize what it actually feels like to be in the presence of a man who really just wants to be with you? Have you ever even experienced that?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is some haven't even experienced that. So they, again, that familiar path that they've
Totally.
been on. So
Yes.
thank you for walking us through all that. And I see myself in a lot of those in my past.
Yeah.
So it sounds very familiar to me. But you talked about this in our previous episode, and I thought this was just so necessary for a lot of people to hear, is the difference from needs and wants. I think so many people want this ideal man or this ideal relationship, but they don't really think about actually what they need and their nervous system needs and why they need it, and really dissecting that and getting crystal clear. And so I would love people to really deeply understand this. So if
Yeah.
you could kind of walk them through it again, that would
Sure.
be great.
So, two things that people don't consider enough is what do I actually really need, like you said, and who do I have to be in the relationship to actually get someone to even be interested in me? Like, what kind of person do I need to be? We will have all sorts of preferences for how a person looks, preferences and certain things in personality, preferences in terms of how a person dresses, what their job is. Oh, I really want a guy who does this for a living, and he's really outdoorsy, or he's really this, or he's really that. All fine. But what do you need in order to feel safe in a relationship? What do you need in order to thrive in a relationship? What do you struggle with that makes it so that you need a particular kind of person to be in a relationship with? If you're someone who comes with a lot of um, emotional baggage, like maybe a terrible divorce or an illness or whatever it is, you need someone who's patient. You need someone who is tolerant. We need someone who's understanding. I think we need this anyway, but I see so many people, it's interesting. Like I've worked with people who've been through horrific trauma, like big T trauma.
Mm.
And they're they're just dating the people who have no tolerance for what they've been through.
Mm.
Or they're dating let's say there's someone who was horrifically abandoned by their ex. And maybe they were also abandoned by their family. I mean, there are people who end up in the foster system and then they're in relationships with people who abandon them too. I mean, everyone throws around an abandoned wound. This is like abandonment wound on steroids.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what you need is a partner who maybe you work with and live with, a partner who values togetherness disproportionately higher than they value their independence.
Mm.
So these are extreme examples to just illustrate what do you need, and the way that you figure out what it is that you need and also what you want is your past relationships, what worked and what didn't work, and understanding your psychology. The more people say, I'm looking for someone, I want to find someone, I'm out there in the dating world. How can you know who's right for you if you don't even know you?
So true. I mean, we could really just sum it up there,
Yeah.
right? It's so true. Yeah. And so I love, I'm going to just interject there is the person you are being as well needs to match what you desire. I
Yes.
remember this was very much the work I did. I wanted, obviously, respect. I wanted honesty. I wanted, whatever, my list, right? And
Yeah.
they were all great qualities like that anybody would want. But I had to turn the mirror on myself and ask, like, okay, am I being that?
Yeah.
If I'm being that, if I'm not being that, how could I expect to find and be in alignment with a partner that has those qualities? And so that's what the real work is. And I think that's what
Yes.
your book is about really is taking the responsibility of how you're showing up in the relationship is ultimately, I mean, you can't control other people, but if you want to have a healthy relationship, you need to be the healthy one in it as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then if you're the healthy one in it, it's only going to, and you're with someone unhealthy, it's only going to magnify that even more. And then you have your answer,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. So good. I know a lot of people are looking for the one. What are your thoughts on the one?
I mean, I've said this before. The one is the person who you choose over and over and over again over a span of months and years and decades. There's the as human beings, we are always seeking oneness. We want to experience that wholeness. We have these voids inside of us, and we're trying to fill the voids from everything outside of us. And the one is just the physical manifestation of the oneness that we seek to experience. For some people, who are more spiritually or religiously minded, they're thinking of oneness with God, with the universe, with spirit. For other people, it's oneness with deep connection with nature, with themselves. But it's a feeling. Everyone has experienced oneness before. Some people, they experience it in a fleeting moment when they're meditating. Some people experience it when they're listening to their favorite song and they're just in the moment. It's whenever you are fully in the present moment, where where in that moment you are completely unburdened by responsibilities and life and all your stress, and you're just in the moment and you feel like nothing is missing. Some people experience that during sex or orgasm. Some people experience it, in all different ways. We can't feel that way all the time because life is really that dance between suffering and oneness.
Hmm.
And I think the goal is to try to feel more oneness more of the time. but we all have really messy minds. And, this is why people like Eckhart Tolle are so huge, because it really is about the present moment. And so the one is the manifestation. We think that with the one, we're going to experience oneness. And here's the thing, we can experience that with that person, but we have to put in the work to make that happen. They're not just going to come like an angel that was like predestined to find you and then make life all better. I mean, one way to think about it is maybe the one is the one who was meant to completely destroy you emotionally so that you woke up to your true purpose in life.
Yeah. I could definitely say that. Like, I've had some damn hard hits, heartbreaks,
Yeah.
learned so many lessons, but I wouldn't be who I am today without those lessons, because I wouldn't have dived so deeply into personal development. I probably wouldn't have this podcast. Like, it's
Yeah.
like so many things birthed out of my journey in learning those lessons and being
Yes.
through the hardship. So it's always on the flip side going to serve us, Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's the
So
one that was for us when we were 17. Then there's the one that maybe we married and got divorced. There's a lot of the ones.
yeah, exactly. So stress is a big thing. We all experience it. You can't avoid it. That's just the human experience. But I
Yes.
know stress highly affects relationships. So for people that are in relationships, what are some tips or tools that you think we could do to reduce the stress, and especially the stress it has on our relationships?
So the first tip is, it's not the stress, it's your reaction to the stress. It's how your nervous system is or is not adapting to what's happening. Now, there are certain things in life that are incredibly stressful and hard on anyone. And in order to not let that event swallow you alive and destroy your relationship, you may need to get help and to really be proactive about dealing with that. But truth be told, it's the little things that people get stressed about over nothing, worried about work, and then we get self-consumed, and then we're not as engaged in our relationship because we're carrying so much tension. And so for that, it really is the way that you're reacting to it. And um, you have to learn how to respond to your stress differently, because that's really what drives people apart. They forget what's important. It becomes a habit. They're habitually bringing the stress home to their partner, whereas maybe out in the world, they're giving everyone else the better sides of them.
Hmm.
So these are the things that we need to think about. We get you know, we forget gratitude. I mean, this is not judgment. I've been there. Like, I know this really well. So we forget to be grateful for things. We forget to be grateful for our partner and our life with our partner. And so people think that once you know, once they figure out their money problems, or once they figure out their schedules, or once they figure out their stress, then their relationship, then everything will get better. When it's the reverse, it's once you learn how to respond to the inevitable stressors of life, that your relationship will improve.
I think a lot of people need to hear that right now.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but it's very true.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, I know that a lot of people have experienced this in relationships, that their partner will get a little lazy, a little comfortable.
Yeah. Oh
What would
yeah.
you say, being on, let's say you're that person where you're noticing your partner is lazy? What should the person in that position do, say?
That's a really, really good question. So you think you're starting to feel like your partner is just like taking you a little bit for granted,
Mm,
right? Um, well, there's a couple of things you can do. One is, and this I think is particularly pertains to a lot of women. Are you, how much are you relying on this person? Are you living your life? That's a really important thing. That's also an important thing for certain codependents to hear.
Mm.
Are you actually living your life? And are you doing things that make you happy? Or are you just relying on your partner to make you happy? I feel like that's a really important message for people to hear as it pertains to your question. The other thing is, you can just say, first off, am I taking this person for granted?
Mm.
Always ask yourself this first. And then let's just say you're like, you know what? I kind of want them to bring me flowers again, or take me out for dinner again, or plan dates. You can just straight up say, when you do that, I find you incredibly sexy.
And men totally respond to that, right? That's like,
Yes. And I think women respond to it well as well.
mm, affirmation, right?
We respond to affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is different if someone is just not pulling their weight in the relationship, and you may have to have a serious conversation with them. But and look, one of the plagues of a relationship is taking each other for granted. Everybody wants to feel wanted in their relationship. Everyone wants to feel attractive in their relationship. So don't punish them. Don't play a game. Don't act like hard to get or anything like that. But if you're in the relationship and they've gotten just a little bit too comfortable, then remind them of what actually you find attractive in them and see if that changes anything.
So helpful, really helpful. Love that. So I know when it comes to confrontation, I know a lot of people to make amends first, they respond to another person going first, right? So you state in your book, if you want to make it work, you need to go first. And I think a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines waiting for their partner to go. So
Yes.
what would you say to
So
that?
when it comes to conflict, the best way to handle conflict as a couple is to fix it right away. Look at the problem, sit down, talk it through, and make that problem go away. Even if making the problem go away is, let's just agree to disagree and truly agree to disagree. But when you're talking it out, go first, talk about what it is because that's what you're saying, right? That's what you're asking, is about talking it out.
Yeah.
You want to be able to share your experience without using words like you and always and never. Instead of and instead saying words like I am feeling this, I am experiencing that, we are. Always do that. And then what has to happen is that the two of you have to make sure that after one of you speaks, that the other one is able to say, okay, what I heard you say is this. And you have to both agree that you are both understanding each other's perspective, that you're both hearing it. That's active listening. And you can't move on in the conversation until the other person can say what they heard, and you can be like, okay, you heard me. You heard me. But you need two people who are deeply committed and adamant about preserving the sanctity of their relationship, that they're willing to have that kind of conversation with each other, so that whatever's ailing them goes away. And that is the best way to deal with conflict.
Don't you wish we learned this like so much earlier in our life?
I am
Communication
on a
101.
mission to get this into the schools.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I think there's so many more resources we need into the schools. I remember, Shielana Ayana from
Yeah.
Rising Women.
Rising women, yeah.
I remember in our interview, she said the importance of willingness in a relationship
Mm,
is top priority, because if you don't have the partners, as you kind of mentioned, willing to help this relationship and save and keep the what's the word I'm looking for, preserve the relationship, basically.
yes, yes,
It's so critical. Obviously the other person plays a part in the relationship. That's why it's two people. So
yes,
yeah, so important. I would
absolutely.
love to, reading through your book, and thank you for our early copy. I wanted to pull out some of the statements and ask you. So I have these written down so we can unpack it a little deeper. A healthy relationship demands that we nurture the relationship we have with ourselves. So, in which ways can we deepen the relationship we have with ourselves, as we kind of touched on getting to know ourselves more? What are some recommendations you have?
Learning how to meet uh, your needs for security, your needs for adventure, your needs for connection, your need for contribution and growth. So learning how, understanding what your needs are and learning how to meet your needs, which is what I talk about in the book, that is probably the most important element to strengthening the relationship with yourself, is recognizing what your needs are, recognizing that they matter, and then knowing how to meet your needs. Very, very, very important. Um, Purpose, having some sort of purpose in life, something that gets you up in the morning, something that gives your life meaning. That's how you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Um, Understanding what your values are, uh, you know, figuring out what you want in life, figuring out what you want so that you can get more of what you want in life. It's very hard to get what you want if you don't know what you want.
For sure. Yeah.
So these are like the main pillars of really strengthening your relationship with yourself. And then there's a big part of strengthening your relationship with yourself is strengthening your relationships with others.
Mm.
It's hard to fully strengthen your relationship with yourself if you have um, a beef with a family member that you're not dealing with, or with a friend. So we don't exist in a bubble. A big part of working on ourselves is working on ourselves relationally as well.
Mm. So good. Okay, another one. You stay in your head. Your relationship is dead.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people have heard this in other ways as well. So,
Yes.
how are we sabotaging our relationships by staying in our head?
Our minds are kind of like story making machines, and we get in our heads and we ruminate and we create a whole narrative around something that's not based on reality. And it's usually charged with a lot of emotion. And inside there is where resentment grows. And resentment is the silent killer of all relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're in our head, then we're not actually communicating. And then we might actually be taking something small and making it much bigger, and then creating all this resistance that we have, that then developing all this resistance towards our partner, and then creating a real problem. So you have to, we all have in ancient yogic philosophy, there's this idea of the monkey mind. And it's like, if you think of like a monkey swinging from branch to branch, from tree to tree, that's sort of like our thoughts. And the monkey is wild. And so we have to tame our minds, and we have to question our thoughts often, because many people are highly neurotic, and we get neurotically in our minds without actually communicating. And then again, creating a narrative that can very, 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 very quickly and easily get out of control.
So true. So true. And I think
Yeah,
this
and this could be
applies to
about
everyone.
anything in life.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. I think this really, really rings so true. You state every person who struggles to have a healthy relationship also struggles to love themselves.
Yes.
So, how could we cultivate a higher regard for ourselves, self love, and self acceptance? I think self acceptance is a big, big piece.
Yeah, I think so when my definition of self-love truly is self-acceptance, which is I see myself as having inherent value and worthiness, even though there are parts of me that need improvement. And it's a very, very delicate dance for most to be able to look in the mirror and say, wow, some people really have to make a lot of changes, but then to also know that they have value even though they have to make those changes. This it's not it's this interesting paradox. It is a self-loving thing to do, to take on challenges so that you grow. And it is through the act of taking on challenges that develops your self-esteem. And sometimes we take on challenges because we're desperate for something to change. And we climb that mountain that is before us. And that is the thing that ultimately raises our self esteem and makes us feel proud of ourselves and accomplished. There's also the way that we talk to ourselves, speaking of the mind being a monkey mind and the mind being a messy place. And I talk about the mind being a battlefield in my book, right?
Yeah.
And most people talk to themselves horrifically. And they're not even conscious of it. So a big part of it is learning, practicing, I should say, becoming conscious of the way that you talk to yourself. And when you are aware of yourself saying something mean to you, then you have to say, I'm not going to do that. Like you have to discipline yourself and say, I'm absolutely not going to do that. That's a habit. And I don't, you could think of yourself as a little girl or a little boy and just, and really treat yourself with kindness. I mean, compassion is useless if it's not turned inward.
Mm.
It's really true. There's nothing noble about having compassion for people around you when you can't have compassion for yourself.
So true. So true. Okay, you have 9 truths in the book, and I know we've gone over a lot of them. Is there any ones that we didn't touch on that we should bring up to talk about?
I would just say that the last truth is going to be a real doozy for people. It's you must make peace with your parents.
Mm.
Make the way that I describe it is you could have a great relationship with your parent, but um, they still have too much influence over your belief system. And so maybe making peace with your parents is learning that um, you don't have to be someone who you're not just to get mommy and daddy's approval. Making peace with your parents for some people could mean that you can never actually speak to them again because it would be unsafe for you to speak to them again. This is a very extreme example, but you could still make peace with the story that you have around it. And this defined very a lot of my life was my relationship with my father. So I felt very qualified uh, to write this chapter. I'm
Mm.
not asking people to do something that I've never had to do myself. So, and I think that I wanted to add that that's important because a lot of people can say, well, easy for them to say, or easy for her to say, whatever. But yeah, so our relationships with our parents show up in our adult romantic relationships. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it is. And so you need to understand that. And if you have something, if there is a story or a relationship with one or both of your parents that is responsible in some way for your um, lack of healthy relationships up until this point, it needs to be addressed. And that's what I attempt to help the reader with in that chapter.
So good. Jillian, we went through so much. I have a plethora of other questions, but I really want to honor your time and I really want people to grab your new book that's available, should be available once this episode comes out. So I, of course, will have that in the show notes. There is so much to learn in this book and also obviously digging into more of Jillian's content. You share so much on your podcast, Jillian on Love. Highly recommend people go check that out and just have it in rotation. Just put subscribe and have it in your rotation, because anybody that, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I'm one that struggled. My deepest pain has been in relationships. And, I just got married. I'm 44 years old. Took me a
Congratulations.
long time, but, I've been
Congratulations.
in, what's that?
I said congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. But it's like, I think about that and I remember my mom saying like, that's a big deal. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm 44, my first marriage. I've been in a 10-year relationship, a 6-year, and then this one's a 6-year. And it took us some time, but
Oh,
there
okay.
was reasons why.
Yes.
But but still I have to be reminded these things because I still have patterns.
Yes.
Like, even though I've done all the work, I mean, it's not like
Yes.
I've
We all
arrived
have that.
anywhere.
Yeah.
It's something we have to be reminded of. And I think obviously we all want to be in a healthy relationship. So the best thing we could do is learn more. And Jillian, you share so much, but you're so real and really you simplify it. You're just giving us the truth.
Yeah,
So
I
thank
try
you.
to make it easy to digest, because a lot of these things are not, they're nuanced and they're complex. So I try to make them digestible. Thank you so much for your kind words, and
Oh
it's
yeah, for
always such
sure.
a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I've just in listening and learning more from you, it's enhanced my awareness around things as well. So I'm sure a lot of people heard things that were confronting for them, but again, with the awareness, we can then make the change, and that's so empowering as we've
Yes.
talked about. So,
Yes.
Jillian, thank you again. All will be in the show notes, so grab her new book as well. And I so appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.